Hey, everybody. Good morning and welcome to another interview in the Future Proof Your Law Firm group. Today, I am very excited to have Martin Mohr with us today. Thank you, Martin, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Luke. It's a pleasure to be here as well.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to be talking with you. I know you got some cool things coming up. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a brief introduction, just kind of on your background, kind of what you're working on right now?
Sure. I've been a solo practitioner out of law school after 3 years at the district attorney's office, a sole proprietor for the next 17 plus. I've been practicing family law since for the last 17 years, and I practice mostly in Bronx, New York, and we're actually expanding to other parts of New York at this point, which I guess we can talk about a little later, but has, surely an impact based on the current topic we're dealing with today.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So before we get into that, why don't we go a little bit back? Because I always like to ask my attorneys when they come on the show, is being an attorney something you knew you always wanted to do? Getting into family law, is that something you kind of had a passion for? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I would say it was a combination. I certainly had family members who were attorneys, people who I had seen, in my own personal life who had, come up in the professional fields. And it was a thought of mine. And then as things, gradually got more and more intensive in my education, I started getting involved in moot courts and mock trials. And it really gave me a little bit more of a flavor of what it might be like to be in a courtroom setting. After that, I said, you know what, let me give law school a try. And, I always figured that if it wasn't something that I actually ended up doing, there were lots of different opportunities within the field itself to explore variety of areas, whether it was, legislative, politics, many different fields of law. So I really hadn't quite landed on exactly what I wanted to do. I did have my father actually, who also was a family court judge, and he, as I guess every father would, kind of pushed me slightly in the direction of law. So I'm sure that was a part of it. And I started practicing family law as a result of getting involved in an assigned counsel program, which very early on in my career was essentially a way to pay the bills and have a job. But it gave me a great deal of flexibility. That flexibility allowed me to do certain things in my personal life that I might not ordinarily be able to do in a 9 to 5 job. So, I got kind of entrenched in family law, and it started to really take more of an interest as things went on. And I guess, like every field, at least for me, once I get involved in it, I want to sort of master my craft and be the best at it.
Gotcha. No, that's a very interesting story. Yeah. And I know you have a lot of experiences to share. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this. So why don't we start with going into, I know COVID brought a lot of changes for your firm and kind of a new adventure that you're starting. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? The beginning of COVID, what was going on with your law firm, why you decided to make some changes and where those changes are at now.
Sure. Pre-COVID, I would say 80 to 85% of my daily routine was being in a courthouse, whether that was, in an actual trial or a regular court appearance or traveling in between courtrooms. I would say a good portion of my day I was on my feet, moving around, going from place to place. I don't think I have to explain what happened in March of 2020, but it really kind of at the snap of a finger or a flip of a light switch, whichever you want to euphemism you want to look at, things shut down in New York. I suspect it happened not only in other states, but in other countries. And it really had sort of a shuttered up feeling to it. And, some of family court, which is where I am, couldn't shut down. New York was able to adapt, at least in family court, a little bit quicker than others. But very early on, I sort of had the mindset of, you know what, we're going to have to make do with what we've got and find a different way to navigate the system. The court system here kind of patched together through the use of Zooms and technology. We started out using Skype, so some of the higher priority type cases were being heard in the family court, and those included orders of protection, child abuse and neglect cases, and juvenile delinquency cases. So those, for the most part, were the types of cases that were being heard. And I was sort of in a unique position in that I was a member of an organization through the assigned counsel plan at the time. And I have a private practice and an assigned counsel practice. So as a result of being involved in the assigned counsel practice, they needed people to sort of pick up the pieces of this sort of broken or at least fractured system, and do some of the things that were being done live online. So very early on, I did feel a part of sort of a building phase in the court system and my role in the court system as an attorney for adults in all different kinds of cases.
Oh, gotcha. No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I bet that, so as you were going from, adopting this online format, I know recently you have decided to kind of partner up with another firm. So why don't you talk a little bit about why you made that decision, and kind of how that is kind of evolving your practice and what you guys are working on?
Sure. So a colleague of mine, Ethan Stewart, who's also been a member of this panel for probably about 10 or 12 years. So we had a lot of commonalities with one another's practice. We both had, our own private practices in addition to this assigned counsel plan. I would say for about 4 years, maybe more, I've been tracking a professional services organization that markets to solo attorneys and small firms or businesses. One of the tricks about law school, in short, about what this company does, is they're a fractional CEO, CFO, and COO program. They market directly to solo practitioners. And for a very long time, I kind of said to myself, half in, not really sure I wanted to do it. And then finally, I had met Ethan, and Ethan and I ended up talking about this philosophy that out of law school, we're not taught how to run a business. A law firm is in fact a business, and the only difference is, an attorney's office is selling legal services. So this professional organization that we're working with really embraces that philosophy and teaches, in part, how to run a business. So that's how Ethan and I initially connected. And then after we connected, we made some decisions on how we wanted to run our business. We created some, partnership agreements. We created some rules around our partnership, how we wanted to be responsible for various elements to the business. the formation, so to speak, of the business. So Ethan and I, we met about probably know each other for about 8 to 10 years or so, but it was, I guess, a combination of him kind of understanding and taking hold of the principles that I was embracing, and sort of being simpatico about where we were going. So that's how we connected. And then we decided to form from our own separate law firms. We decided in New York to brand our firm as a trade name, and we went from our individual names to the New York Family Law Group, which, quite frankly, I was a little surprised was available, but that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, honestly I kind of was too when I first started. But that's pretty cool. No, that it's a good name for sure. And I'm sure that'll help you guys in the long run. And I'm glad the partnership is going good so far. Because I really haven't had too many people talk about this, I'd love, to get some insight. If any lawyer is maybe looking to get into a partnership, what are some things that you recommend they look for to make sure that, the partnership is right for them, or just some tips on executing it properly?
Yeah, excuse me for a second. I would say the biggest part to a partnership, and it is new to me, the first thing is exploration, and determining that you and the person or persons that you anticipate partnering with have similar goals, and have similar working styles, and similar ideas of where you want to be. And we very early on took partner profiles. We created a bunch of questions to get a better idea of how we sort of look at certain legal issues, not from a this type of case or that type of case, but more from a personality perspective, more from an idea to get a goal oriented kind of philosophy of what that person wants, and just sort of seeing the nitty gritty details to make sure that the partnership is going to work. I think in doing that due diligence with one another, in addition, it's important to ask around to people who have been in partnerships, and get their feedback as to what did or didn't work with their partnership, why they were in a partnership or were not in a partnership. I asked a fair share of people, probably about 5 or 6 that I know who are in partnerships or were in partnerships. And you do hear some horror stories out there, and I asked why it failed, or I asked what's been working that keeps it as a partnership. We haven't gotten to that stage, but I suspect our goal is in 3 to 5 years to revisit, to make sure that we're still on the same page as to what we want to do going forward. I think it's very similar to a marriage. You can't expect that without working on it, it's going to absolutely 100% work forever. That's, I guess, how we formed, and some of the things we did in order to make sure we did it right. And so far, so good.
Well, good. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And I totally agree that it would make sense that one of the most important pieces to a partnership is making sure that you have an alignment of those goals, because, you might be the best of buds with this person, really good friends. But if you want to take the business one way and the other one wants to take it another way, that can create, some major clashing. So I can see why that would be very, very important for sure. Another question I have, as this partnership and kind of this new brand that you're creating, one of the questions that we talk about a lot about in the show is kind of marketing a new firm. If you're stepping into a new space or kind of coming up with a new, starting your own firm, or in your guys' case, having old firms but starting kind of a new third entity, How have you guys been able to market this? Are you leveraging previous clients, your previous, I guess, brand names from before? Or are you implementing new strategies totally for this one? Are you having that, CEO company help you out with that? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say that the professional service organization that we engaged gives us the guidance to understand what a business is. And I think the first real step is understanding what those parts of the business are. And certainly what you're hitting on is one of those parts, sort of marketing. We're in the infancy stages, but we're certainly going to do some brand on brand marketing and brand awareness marketing. But we're also going to be doing some direct response marketing. And some people who are attorneys don't even realize the type of marketing they're looking at, especially an average consumer. So we don't really have lists or clientele lists, if you will, of previous clients that might fall into that category. We certainly have, combined probably, 2,000 previous clients, but those clients are probably not in a position to retain our legal services going forward. But just knowing they exist, knowing that they're in our book of people that we've interacted with in the past gives us a little bit of leverage to at least get that information out there. We're going to definitely do some, direct response marketing with, a couple of different lead magnets and relatively low cost marketing for the time being. I would envision down the road when things sort of either pick up or we need to know, have the right number of clients coming to our doorstep and the capacity to deal with those clients. We're anticipating having to scale up, and that's going to require us to be able to produce the right number of leads to our doorstep to make sure that we can get them in the door, service them, and hopefully get them out. So I hope that answers the question about marketing. I may have either gone a little under or over.
No, I think that was a great answer. Yeah. I mean, you kind of mentioned this before, but there's a lot more that goes into running a law firm than just practicing law, as you guys are finding out, and I'm sure a lot of other people are as well. And marketing is a big, important piece of that for sure. And I think what you just talked about at the end there is also very important, because some people might want to get right into, advertising or just generating clients in whatever way they're doing it. But they might not have a good foundation set up. And if you could generate all the clients in the world, but if they are not retaining your services, or maybe they're unhappy because you're not able to actually provide the results that you promised them, or you're saying that you're going to get for them, that can be bad in the long run for sure. So I'm glad you guys are taking that approach. I think that's very smart. So, I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I'd love to know, what does the future look like for your guys' firm? I know you said that you're talking about a couple things, like growing into other areas. I know that you are previously, before the interview, you talked about a book you guys are kind of working on. Why don't you talk about some of those upcoming things?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly would say we have some upcoming, items that we're looking at, including, a book that we're dealing with, and that was, really a creation that started about a year ago. We decided to do, and it's really in part a marketing piece to get out there. But it's also informational for people who are getting involved in a family court situation, or a potential family court situation that they're not expecting. And certainly, that the biggest part I think there is to recognize about selling legal services is that you're selling those legal services for them and not to them. So I think it's very easy to get sort of roped into the sort of hunting process, that a law firm has sort of created in their culture of, looking for hunting down clients, I guess, and trying to get them to sign on the dotted line. And we've really taken the approach that we want to find out where these people who are looking for legal services, why they're even coming to the door, and what their problem is, before we can even figure out whether or not we can help them. And I think some of that causes some self-exploration on their own. And I think that some people don't even know the problem they have until they start to really delve into not even legal issues, but why they're there and what has brought them to this point. I was on the phone with a client, potential client rather, yesterday. I like to find out how much time and money they've invested in trying to solve their legal problem. And, I had asked the question to her, how much time do you think you spent on trying to solve this problem? And she said, oh, not a lot, really not so much. And then I pointed out to her, well, how about the phone calls that you make all the time to try to get him to do certain things that, you're not getting results from, all the reminder phone calls that you have to make, or the requests you have to make to get financial support. And then she started to realize, gee, I really am putting a lot of time into that component of my life. But that is not a legal component per se, of how that problem exists, but why. And once you can get people to understand that their legal problem is bigger than just going into a courthouse, that really sets the tone. So I'm hoping that answered your question too. I feel like I might have gotten distracted a little bit from my four-legged friend.
No, that's okay. No, I think that was very valuable. I appreciate it. Like what you were talking about in the beginning with the ebook, and the book putting out there. I think providing content and content marketing is a great way for lawyers to attract potential customers. It might not be right off the bat somebody reads it and automatically becomes a client, but I think it's, it really shows that what you're talking about. You're willing to share information with others. I think, a lot of kind of the old method of billboard marketing where it's just name, phone number, call now, is kind of dying, because yes, it's important to stay top of mind for individuals. But there's so many different attorneys nowadays. You really have to find out ways to stand out. And I think having a book like that is a great way to not only share content, but maybe share a little bit of your personality. And I think what you were talking about a lot about, things when it comes to legal issues might not all be legal issues, is also very important, and covering what your potential client really wants or needs, and not just forcing them, force feeding them your services, is definitely the way to go. So that's very valuable. Thank you for sharing that, Martin. And
Yeah.
I appreciate everything today. I got one final question for you.
Sure.
This one right here. For anybody who, this is one last thing, one last piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is maybe struggling right now, or, they're struggling to get off on their own. They're struggling to kind of future-proof their firm, adapting the tech to modern technologies. What is one final thing that you would give to them?
If I had one thing, to one word to just sort of describe what the encompassing question you have there, it would be to adapt. And this is something that I talk about often to people. And the example I usually give has to do with, 3 book companies that existed for, I don't know, 40 plus years. One of them was a company called Borders Books. I don't know if you're familiar with that. One of them was Barnes and Noble, and one of them was Amazon. So it seemed as though things started to get much more digital. And you know, Borders Books did not in any way, shape, or form adapt, and they went out of business. Barnes and Noble took sort of a hybrid approach, which is kind of what the courts are doing, and they sort of adapted. And of course, there's the Amazon behemoth that we all know, and I could say that they've definitely adapted. So I would say adapting to what's going on is probably the most important thing. And COVID is something that will happen again. Not specifically COVID itself, but there will be some sort of catastrophic event that shuts things down or creates such a problem that we end up having to figure out how to adapt again. So I think that's really important, especially in line with what this today's discussion is. Sort of how to future proof and be ready to to do that going forward.
Oh yeah, no, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. That it is very important to adapt. I mean, I'm really hoping that firms and everybody in their life takes the lessons that they've learned because of COVID, because of the pandemic, and puts those into use in their practice, in their daily lives, and adapts. Because, like you said, it's probably inevitable that something is going to happen again. It might not even be on a larger scale. Maybe if something happens and building catches on fire or whatever, that's only one building, but you're forced to go digital for a day. If your business isn't, your law firm isn't ready to adapt, then you're going to kind of be stuck. So I think that is very, very key. So thank you so much for all of the value you shared today, Martin. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
If people do want to learn more about you, your firm, or kind of stay in the loop with this upcoming book, where would be the best place for them to find out about you?
So, I mean, definitely, the visitation of our website would work. That's the New York Law Firm group. And I'm sure if you type it in, it'll come up, but it's newyorklawfirmgroup.com. And, they'll be able to get some of our free resources on that website. And, we have, in addition to some ebooks that are available, we have the option of a hardcover version, and in addition, we have some videos up there, and of course, calling the firm and asking questions is always an option as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you again, Martin, for being here. Hope you all have a great day, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.
Great.